The sharp, bitter smell of my burned home still clung to my hair when she strutted into my courtroom as if she'd bought the place. There I was, Judge Miriam Blackwood, black robes draped over my shoulders, gavel in hand, eyes locked on the woman who had just set fire to a sitting judge's house. The sheer audacity made my jaw tighten. But Bryn Ashworth Sterling didn't have the faintest idea what she had just stepped into. Here's the thing: when you torch a judge's home, you better pray she doesn't get the chance to legally return the favor. And sweetheart, I was about to dish out a 5-course banquet of justice with a side of federal prison time. This HOA queen bee thought torching my house would silence me. Instead, she ignited a blaze in me that would burn down her entire crooked empire. Every shady fee, every fabricated claim, every intimidation stunt, I had the proof, neatly filed and waiting. Tell me, what would you do if the person who destroyed you handed themselves over on a silver legal platter? Wherever you're watching from, settle in. This revenge is about to get ugly. 6 months before my home turned into a crime scene, I was still Judge Miriam Blackwood, respected, feared in the criminal courts, but privately gutted. I'd just buried Harold after cancer had devoured him. Piece by piece, 28 years of marriage gone. Our 1940s craftsman in Pinewood Estates felt more like a tomb than a home. Pinewood used to be a quiet haven, blue-collar families, retired teachers tending roses, kids riding bikes in the street. Then the money moved in. Humble ranch houses were bulldozed, replaced with oversized McMansions boasting triple garages and wine cellars. The old-timers, people like Walt Henderson, who'd lived there since '65, were drowning under skyrocketing property taxes while the newcomers fussed over neighborhood standards. And at the top of that gentrification food chain was Bryn Ashworth Sterling, the living embodiment of every entitled suburban nightmare you've ever met. Add in designer athleisure, a self-appointed sense of superiority, and a silver Tesla, worth more than most annual salaries, and you've got the picture. At 45, she always had some $20 superfood smoothie in hand while explaining how everyone else was living wrong. She and her contractor husband had moved in 2 years earlier, with plans to elevate Pinewood to its full potential. Translation: purge the undesirables. Our first meeting happened while I was installing Harold's memorial fence, a 6-foot privacy barrier we'd planned together in his final months. A quiet place to drink coffee and watch the sunrise without curious eyes. His roses, still blooming from 15 years of care, filled the morning air with sweetness. Then came the crunch of expensive boots over fallen leaves. "You must be the widow," she said. No hello, no condolences, just blunt appraisal. "Judge Blackwood," I corrected, brushing soil from my hands with deliberate calm. "Right, the judge," she said, my title like it was an illness. "I'm Bryn, HOA president. We have a problem." Out came a pink tape measure, her weapon of choice. The metallic snap cut through the quiet like a whip. She measured my fence with exaggerated precision, lips pursed in fake disapproval. 6 feet 2 inches. Our rules clearly say 6 feet max. That's a $500 fine plus removal costs. I rose slowly, my spine creaking from grief and sleepless nights. "Show me the rule." She flipped through a leather portfolio, nails clicking on the pages like tiny gavels. 5 minutes later, she had nothing because the rule didn't exist. My fence was exactly 6 feet, confirmed by a licensed surveyor, her face flushed under her spray tan. "We'll see about that, Judge." The venom in her voice told me this wasn't about fence height. That night, over reheated leftovers and Harold's favorite bourbon, I dug into court records. And there it was. 3 years earlier, Sterling Premium Builders had stood before my bench trying to con an 80-year-old veteran out of $30,000 for bogus roof repairs. The roof was perfectly fine. I'd slammed the gavel on them hard, even referring the case for fraud investigation. This fence nonsense was revenge, pure and simple. But Bryn made a fatal mistake. She picked a fight with someone who'd spent 2 decades sentencing murderers, rapists, and con artists without flinching. A woman who had watched her husband die with dignity, planning a memorial in his honor. Someone with nothing left to lose and a complete mastery of how the legal system can be turned into a weapon. The feel of Harold's fence posts under my palm reminded me why I built it, not to shut out the world, but to guard something sacred. Memories. Love. Our final project together. Bryn had just declared war on a federal judge's sanctuary. In my world, we have a term for that kind of stupidity. Exhibit A. Within 2 weeks, Bryn unleashed a campaign I can only call psychological warfare disguised as HOA enforcement. She must have memorized every petty tyrant's playbook, because my mailbox turned into a delivery chute for certified letters 7 in 10 days, each one more absurd than the last. Violation number 1. An unapproved decorative garden feature. The feature? Harold's memorial stone, carved simply within memory of love that grows eternal. Apparently, mourning didn't match Pinewood's uniform aesthetic. Violation number 2. Non-regulation mailbox color. My black mailbox had been there since the Reagan years. Suddenly, it was an eyesore. Violation number 3. The one that made my teeth grind. Excessive bird feeding creating nuisance conditions. Harold loved cardinals. Watching them at the feeder had become my quiet morning ritual. Each letter demanded fines from $200 to $500, threatening liens and legal action. The fancy paper they printed them on probably cost more than some of the violations. Here's where 20 years on the bench came in handy. I knew Colorado's HOA laws by heart. I'd memorized them back in law school when my landlord tried similar intimidation tricks. Her notices were riddled with legal holes, citing rules that didn't exist, skipping mandatory hearings, and making fines that weren't remotely reasonable. So, I got to work. 3 nights in Harold's basement office, surrounded by his old law books, I built my counteroffensive. Filed a formal complaint with the State Real Estate Commission, photographed every inch of my property, and tracked every bogus fine in meticulous spreadsheets. But Bryn wasn't done. One Thursday, while I was sentencing drunk drivers, my new security cameras caught her in the act, rolling up with her interior designer and her personal trainer. For 2 hours, they staged violations like a low-budget crime drama. The designer gestured dramatically at Harold's roses, as if offended by their existence. The trainer, clipboard in hand, pretended to take inspection notes. Watching the footage, my anger sharpened. They were manufacturing evidence to back fraudulent fines, conspiracy to commit fraud in my courtroom's language. Then Walt Henderson knocked on my door, speaking in hushed tones. "Judge, this Bryn woman's been targeting folks. Remember the Rodriguez family? She fined them over their Virgin of Guadalupe statue, called it non-conforming religious imagery, $800 before they gave up and moved. And that single mom down the street? Fined for her kids' chalk drawings on their own driveway. Rainbows, hopscotch squares, she called it, defacing community property." The pattern clicked into place. This wasn't just about me. Bryn was systematically harassing anyone who didn't fit her perfect suburb fantasy. Hispanic families, single moms, elderly residents. And now, a widowed judge who'd ruled against her husband's scams. This was discrimination wrapped in HOA letterhead, enforced with fraudulent paperwork. I started writing, the scratch of my pen loud in the stillness of Harold's office. He'd always said a good legal strategy was like surgery: precise, methodical, devastating when done right. And I was about to operate on Bryn's little kingdom until there was nothing left. Her next move vaulted straight from harassment into felony territory. While I was downtown sentencing a wife-beater, she staged an emergency inspection, something that existed only in her imagination. The cameras caught her strutting through my backyard in designer yoga pants, pink tape measure swinging, snapping photos from angles a paparazzo would envy. Then she pressed her face to my kitchen window, peering in at Harold's coffee mug still sitting on the counter, the one I couldn't bring myself to wash. But her lowest act, she left my back gate wide open on purpose. The footage showed her testing the latch, making sure it wouldn't close, then walking away with a satisfied smirk. When I came home that night, exhausted from court, my sanctuary felt violated. Worse, my worst fear had come true. Gavel was gone. That 14-year-old Tabby wasn't just a cat. He was Harold's last gift to me, rescued from the courthouse parking lot during a storm, the one who curled on Harold's lap through chemo. My last living link to 28 years of marriage. The panic hit like a fist to the chest. I spent 3 days searching, calling his name through alleys, checking storm drains, my voice breaking. Walt organized search parties. Even the Rodriguezes drove back to help. And then came the call that froze my blood. Judge Blackwood, the voice said. This is Dr. Martinez at Mountain View Animal Emergency. Someone turned in a cat matching your cat's description. He was in terrible condition. When I found Gavel, he was barely conscious inside an oxygen tent, ribs shattered, dangerously dehydrated, and so traumatized he was almost unrecognizable. $800 worth of emergency surgery later, the veterinarian delivered news that made my hands tremble with fury. His injuries were consistent with being hunted by machinery, likely industrial-strength leaf blowers or lawn equipment. The sheer panic alone had nearly ended his life. Security footage confirmed the nightmare. Just 1 hour after Bryn's unlawful entry, her landscaping crew had shown up wielding those same industrial blowers, driving my already traumatized cat into a frenzy through the open gate she'd left. They pursued him for 2 blocks until he collapsed into a storm drain, broken, dying. This was no longer harassment. This was an attempt on a family member's life. And here's where Bryn made her fatal error. She had committed multiple felonies against a sitting judge who knew precisely how to turn the legal system into a weapon of total destruction. I replaced every lock, plastered the property with no trespassing signs, and filed criminal charges for unlawful entry and animal cruelty. Then I called Sarah Morgan at Channel 7, a relentless investigative journalist with a reputation for dismantling suburban corruption. 3 nights later, her segment, Judge vs. HOA, when Watchdog's attack hit the airwaves, Sarah's investigation exposed Bryn's systematic targeting of minority and elderly homeowners, backed by security footage showing her illegal trespassing, and the landscaper's attack on Gavel. The community reaction was explosive. Donations flooded in, not just to cover Gavel's medical bills, but to fund legal action to dismantle that deranged HOA. Justice for Gavel began trending across social media. 3 law firms stepped forward to work pro bono. The Colorado Attorney General's office reached out about possible civil rights violations. Most powerfully, 5 more families emerged with stories just as appalling. Elderly Mrs. Morgan forced to dismantle her late husband's memorial garden. The Johnson family driven into bankruptcy by fines over their disabled son's wheelchair ramp. A clear pattern emerged. Bryn targeted anyone who didn't match her warped vision of suburban perfection. Then came the real turning point. While combing through Colorado property protection laws, I uncovered a legal gem. Unlawful entry with intent to intimidate carried the same weight as burglary. Animal cruelty could be stacked with conspiracy charges if multiple people were involved. Bryn's crew hadn't committed a single crime. They'd opened the door to a federal RICO case. That night, Gavel purred against my chest for the first time since the attack. The sound blended with the low hum of my new security system and the click of my keyboard as I drafted criminal complaints designed to obliterate Bryn's reign for good. Harold always said judges were referees with authority and long memories. Time to show this suburban terrorist what happens when you assault a federal judge's family. She had escalated from civil infractions to felony assault. My retaliation would be biblical. When Bryn realized her trespassing had snowballed into federal charges, her panic went nuclear. Her counterattack: destroy my career before I destroyed hers. The complaint arrived by certified mail that Tuesday morning, bearing the seal of the Colorado Judicial Discipline Commission, making my coffee taste like ash. Her accusations read like a novel. Judge Blackwood abuses judicial power to intimidate honest homeowners, using the legal system for personal vendettas that threaten community safety. Her evidence was criminally imaginative: doctored photos portraying my memorial garden as an eyesore, falsified witness statements from her designer and trainer claiming I'd threatened them, and timestamps so ridiculous a CSI tech would laugh out loud. Then she went nuclear, leaking everything to political blogs hostile to my past environmental rulings. Within hours, I was trending as liberal judge terrorizes patriotic HOA. The comment sections erupted with calls for my impeachment, disbarment, and disturbingly creative suggestions for activist judges who hate America. For 3 days, I watched 2 decades of judicial service shredded by people who couldn't spell jurisprudence yet somehow knew constitutional law better than federal judges. My salvation came disguised as a silver-haired woman with a plate of homemade cookies. Patricia Pat Donnelly looked like every kindly retired librarian, sensible cardigan, orthopedic shoes, hands trembling just slightly with age. What she didn't look like was a 25-year FBI veteran who had specialized in financial crimes and had been quietly investigating Bryn for weeks. "Judge, you need to see this," she said, settling into Harold's chair with the calm authority of someone used to delivering world-altering news. Pat spread photographs across my kitchen table like cards in a high-stakes game. "Meet Bethany Sterling of Phoenix, Arizona. 3 insurance claims in 2 years. A mysterious flood, a coincidental electrical fire, and timely vandalism. $400,000 in payouts gone right before the grand jury convened." My judicial instincts kicked in. Pattern recognition clear as DNA. She'd done this before. Pat's assessment was surgical. Target an established neighborhood, stir up conflict to justify claims, disappear before investigators close in. And here's the kicker: she'd applied for her current homeowner's policy under a false identity. That's federal mail fraud. Pat's documents made my prosecutor's heart sing. Bryn's $800,000 home was insured for $2.8 million. Her application was riddled with lies about past claims, name changes, financial history that would make a federal prosecutor giddy. "She's not after you out of spite," Pat said, stacking the evidence neatly. "You're the distraction keeping everyone focused on HOA drama while she embezzles funds and preps the next accidental fire." It hit me like a gavel to the skull. This wasn't personal revenge, it was criminal misdirection. While I'd been battling over fences and fines, she'd been siphoning HOA emergency reserves and laying the groundwork for an insurance fraud that could wipe out the community. Pat slid over a thick manila folder. Sterling Premium Builders had gone bankrupt last month. Colorado had yanked their license for tax evasion. The HOA presidency wasn't about control, it was about access to community money. And her final reveal froze my blood. Bryn had already filed preliminary claims citing structural issues and growing neighborhood safety concerns. My house wasn't just a target, it was scheduled to be evidence. That night, I sat surrounded by proof that transformed my nightmare into a full-blown federal RICO case. Bank statements showing $340,000 missing from HOA accounts, insurance applications packed with perjury-level lies, and a clear record of discriminatory targeting that screamed civil rights violations. Bryn hadn't picked me over some old court ruling, she'd picked me because terrorizing a federal judge created perfect cover for organized theft. Her mistake? Choosing a target who knew exactly how to dismantle criminal enterprises with every tool in the federal codebook. The glow from my monitor lit Harold's office as I began drafting letters to prosecutors who specialized in interstate fraud and civil rights crimes. Harold used to say patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a weapon. Bryn Ashworth Sterling was about to learn that mixing insurance scams with attacking a federal judge wasn't just foolish, it was life sentence foolish. Pat slid another envelope toward me. "Judge, what I'm about to show you changes everything," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 25 years of hunting federal criminals. Inside were 3 photos. A 2018 California license for Rebecca Ashworth, Bryn's face staring back. A second ID from Phoenix as Beth Sterling. And a 2010 federal prisoner card for Sandra McKenzie of Detroit. "She's a professional community destroyer," Pat explained. 4 states, 6 identities, infiltrate HOAs, embezzle funds, commit insurance fraud. Over $4 million stolen in 10 years. "How many families?" My voice cracked. 15 confirmed, Pat replied. Always the same pattern. drive out minorities and elderly, drain reserves, then burn valuable properties for payouts. In Sacramento, 3 Hispanic families forced out before the community center accidentally burned. In Phoenix, 5 elderly residents died from stress-related health issues during her campaign. The last document made my stomach turn. Architectural plans for my home, marked with notes about electrical weaknesses, foundation access, and prime ignition points. She's been planning to burn you out from day one, Pat said. Your house is worth $180,000, but Harold's upgrades boosted rebuild value to $320,000. She planned to claim the fire spread to her property for double payouts. I ran my fingers over Harold's handwritten notes and the margins projects we'd done together in his final months. She'd turned our love into her profit scheme. Then came the final blow. She wasn't just a con artist, she was a federal fugitive, vanished from witness protection after testifying in 2012. She'd been running multi-state fraud rings under stolen identities ever since. The witness protection violation alone carried a decade in prison. Add the rest: multi-state conspiracy, identity theft, attempted arson against a federal judge, and she was staring at life without parole. I stared at the faces of those she'd destroyed, realizing my nightmare was just another chapter in her long-running federal crime spree. She hadn't picked me randomly, she'd studied me, my husband's death, my vulnerabilities, my schedule. But she'd made a single fatal error. She'd tried this on someone who knew how to unleash the full combined force of the FBI, Treasury, and federal courts. My kitchen became a war room overnight. By Thursday evening, Pat, Walt, and attorney Rebecca Morgan sat at Harold's table like avenging angels, surrounded by evidence boxes heavy enough to bury Bryn's empire. Rebecca, a former federal prosecutor turned white-collar defense powerhouse, who'd never lost a RICO case, had driven down from Denver with 3 paralegals and enough legal firepower to topple a small dictatorship. Judge, we're not just going after neighborhood harassment, she said, unfurling color-coded charts across the table like battle plans for a world war. We were dismantling a 10-year federal crime spree that had ravaged 15 communities and siphoned away more than $4 million. The sharp scent of fresh legal paperwork mingled with the warm, smoky aroma of Walt's pipe as we laid out our 3-pronged plan: federal obliteration, state prosecution, and civil rights takedown. Rebecca's blueprint was both surgically precise and grand in scope. First, federal charges: mail fraud across state lines? That's a 20-year minimum. Wire fraud for electronic HOA theft? Add another 20. Identity theft involving the witness protection program? 10 years. No exceptions. And RICO conspiracy for orchestrated community destruction? Life without parole. She grinned, a predator scenting blood. We were building sentences so long that she'd still be behind bars when rising seas swallowed the prison. Pat orchestrated the involvement of every relevant federal agency with the kind of retired FBI efficiency that made current agents look like mall cops. Colorado Bureau of Investigation, Treasury Financial Crimes, FBI Interstate Fraud Task Force, every one of them was eager for this case. By tomorrow morning, Bryn would be under more federal surveillance than a terror cell. My part was evidence preservation and victim coordination skills honed over 2 decades of handling complex criminal cases. Back in law school, I'd memorized Colorado's Open Records Act after my slumlord tried hiding financial documents. HOA finances were fully accessible to residents who knew how to ask. We were about to demand 5 years of detailed records and watch Bryn's embezzlement empire collapse under the weight of public exposure. Our ace in the hole was Walt's community intelligence web, 6 decades of neighborhood TIs woven into an information network that would make the CIA envious. Every family Bryn had targeted was meticulously documenting her crimes. Mrs. Rodriguez was driving in from Phoenix with 17 witnesses. The Johnsons were compiling disability discrimination evidence that federal prosecutors would cherish, but the most satisfying prep work came from our tech upgrade. Pat had transformed my modest security setup into a federal-grade evidence collection system, capable of recording crimes in crystal clear, courtroom-ready detail. Every camera angle had been fine-tuned for maximum prosecutorial effect. Here's The beauty pad explained, testing audio equipment that could pick up whispers 3 houses away. She's committing fresh crimes while we build the case. Every bogus fine, every harassment letter, every HOA fund transfer instant evidence. Rebecca moved just as swiftly on immediate legal protections. With the ruthless precision of a career spent dismantling white-collar criminals, she secured emergency injunctions to freeze HOA accounts by morning. 3 jurisdictions would get criminal complaints at once. The Colorado Attorney General would receive civil rights violation filings for systematic targeting by ethnicity and age. Financially, Bryn's operation was about to be gutted. From my time on the bench, I knew the Homeowners Protection Act required insurers to alert mortgage holders to fraud probes. That meant her scams would trigger audits across every Pinewood policy, potentially saving neighbors hundreds of thousands in premiums while destroying her standing with insurers nationwide. We also knew that cornered criminals can turn violent. Rebecca arranged protective surveillance for elderly residents and families with children. History had taught us that fraudsters facing life sentences sometimes resorted to physical harm. By midnight, we had built a legal war machine designed to dismantle Bryn's entire operation while shielding every victim she'd ever targeted. The precision was a thing of beauty, the scale overwhelming, the outcome inevitable. When we're done, Rebecca concluded, satisfaction in her voice, Bryn McKenzie will live out her days in federal maximum security. Sterling premium builders will be liquidated to pay restitution. Every resident she harassed will receive compensation plus punitive damages, and will set legal precedents that protect communities nationwide from predators like her. The gentle hum of my upgraded security system blended with the clicking of my keyboard as I drafted victim impact statements sharp enough to make a federal judge demand the harshest penalties. Harold had always told me patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a weapon when paired with overwhelming legal force at the perfect psychological moment. By tomorrow, Bryn Ashworth Sterling would learn the hard way that terrorizing the neighborhood of a federal judge wasn't just reckless, it was life sentence, reputation destroying, career-ending stupidity. Time to deliver justice with extreme legal precision. Bryn's reaction proved she had escalated from petty harassment to full-fledged domestic terrorism. Her desperation was about to turn my street into a crime scene that prosecutors would devour. The attack came Tuesday afternoon while I was downtown sentencing a wife-beater, a perfectly timed move she'd clearly planned by studying my public court schedule. My military-grade security system caught every incriminating moment in high-definition clarity. At 2:47 p.m., unmarked trucks rolled up, unloading a crew that moved with the precision of professionals. Not landscapers, arsonists. They wore coveralls and carried gear designed solely to turn my home into an insurance blaze that would conveniently spread to Bryn's property for maximum payout. Cameras caught them laying accelerant trails around my foundation, hooking unmarked propane lines near electrical panels, and arranging dead brush to ensure flames moved toward her $1 million house. The planning was meticulous, the intent unmistakable, and the evidence damning. But her peak stupidity, showing up with a Channel 7 news crew, claiming she'd gotten anonymous tips about fire hazards at the judge's house. Community safety is my only concern, she told reporter Sarah Morgan, standing right over her own planted evidence. When officials ignore fire prevention, people can die. Her audacity was matched only by the avalanche of federal charges it would bring. Pat's network lit up. Walt had photographed the crew from multiple angles. Mrs. Rodriguez recorded license plates. Even the postal carrier had documented suspicious activity while delivering what could have been my final mail. Then Fire Marshal Jake Morrison arrived for Bryn's so-called inspection request. With 30 years in arson investigation, Morrison spotted the fake evidence instantly. "Judge," he murmured, kneeling beside the staged accelerant trails, "this isn't code violation, it's premeditated murder." Lab analysis would later confirm professional-grade accelerants, gas hookups violating 16 safety codes, and fingerprints matching Sterling premium contractors. The layout showed expert knowledge of fire behavior and how to stage an accident for maximum insurance payouts. "Whoever set this up knows how to kill people and make it look electrical," Morrison continued, disgust in his tone. "This isn't random, it's calculated insurance fraud by way of homicide." When he refused to condemn my home based on fake evidence, Bryn made her fatal move, captured in full on his department-issued body cam. She tried to bribe him, sliding a fat envelope across his clipboard. "Inspector, surely we can resolve this quickly," she said smoothly. "Community safety requires proper documentation. I'm sure you understand cooperation." The camera recorded it all, the cash, the words, her startled face when Morrison informed her that bribing a public official was a federal felony with a 10-year minimum. Pat's intel network quickly confirmed similar arson setups at 3 other targeted homes, each belonging to elderly or minority residents. Federal agents descended on Pinewood like white blood cells attacking a virus, documenting an organized campaign of domestic terror. Rebecca struck fast. Federal warrants for Bryn, her husband, and every member of her crew were issued within hours. Bank accounts frozen pending RICO action. Sterling premium placed under federal forfeiture. And the irony, her planted evidence became the very proof of her premeditated arson conspiracy. The bribery added another layer of felony charges. That evening, I sat surrounded by evidence destined to put every last one of them in federal prison. The acrid stench of accelerant still lingered, but now it smelled less like destruction and more like justice. I realized how close I'd come to dying in Harold's home, surrounded by our memories, while Bryn cashed in on my corpse. She hadn't just schemed to steal, she'd plotted murder under the guise of accident, but her arrogance had destroyed her own empire. Every accelerant trail became evidence. Every bribe, another count. Every silenced witness now stood ready to testify. The hum of surveillance gear blended with the distant coordination of dawn raids that would end her reign forever. Harold had been right. Justice delayed wasn't justice denied. Sometimes it was being honed to lethal sharpness. By morning, Bryn Ashworth Sterling would understand that trying to kill a federal judge brought consequences she'd never dared imagine. The explosion at 3:17 a.m. tore me from dreams of Harold into a nightmare that would follow her to her final prison cell. I was in Walt's guest room, my own home now and safe, when the blast rattled windows 3 blocks away. From Walt's bedroom window, I watched nearly 3 decades of my life vanish in flames. The night outside had transformed into a blinding, infernal orange, our sanctuary reduced to a pyre. Harold's house. The kitchen where we'd mapped out retirement dreams. The bedroom where I held him in his final days. The rose garden where I'd scattered his ashes after he'd cared for it for 15 years. All of it now evaporating into smoke and soon, federal evidence. The blaze was so fierce that Denver Fire locked down a 3-block radius. Whoever said it had known exactly what they were doing. This wasn't random. It was a calculated demolition, designed to look like an electrical accident, carried out with professional precision to cause maximum devastation and hit the perfect window for an insurance payout. But Bryn's arrogance had turned her crime into the most airtight trap federal prosecutors had ever seen. Standing on Walt's porch in Harold's worn bathrobe, I watched our life's memories crumble while federal arson investigator Marcus Webb took charge of a crime scene that could have passed for domestic terrorism. "Judge, this wasn't some random fire," he said darkly. "Thermal imaging had revealed accelerant patterns, perfectly laid fire highways. Somebody wanted you dead, and they wanted it to look like an accident." The evidence was overwhelming. My fireproof security system had survived the inferno, capturing everything. Sterling Premium's crew arriving at 2:45 a.m., followed by Bryn's husband at 3:10 a.m., carrying professional-grade accelerant equipment, but the smoking gun came from insurance investigator Jennifer Park. She'd uncovered that Bryn had filed preliminary claims at 2:30 a.m., 47 minutes before the first flames touched my house. Her paperwork claimed her home would be damaged by fire spreading from mine, when my home wasn't even burning yet. "That's not foresight," Park said with grim satisfaction. "That's proof of premeditated murder." The neighborhood's reaction was swift. People came with blankets, coffee, and a level of righteous outrage that even made the feds take notes. Mrs. Rodriguez held my hands, tears running down her cheeks. "Maya, she tried to kill you. We all saw her plotting this." Then came the moment that would live in prosecution history. Bryn arrived, Dressed in high-end athleisure and full makeup, she appeared at 4:30 a.m., giving news crews a performance worthy of an Oscar. She spoke with staged grief about the tragic accident and even suggested my supposed resistance to inspections might have contributed to the loss of life. What she didn't realize was that FBI agents were recording her every word, while federal marshals were already drafting Dawn arrest warrants backed by evidence so airtight no plea bargain could save her. Financial records revealed the full scheme. Bryn had stolen $340,000 from HOA funds to pay professional arsonists. Her insurance policy valued her house at $2.8 million despite buying it for $800,000, and her pre-filed fire claim would have triggered payouts on a scale some countries' annual budgets couldn't match, but prosecutors had been watching her for months. Bank statements traced payments to known arsonists. Cell phone data placed her and her husband at the ignition site. Insurance applications were riddled with lies, a perjury buffet for any federal courtroom. Rebecca Morgan's response was biblical. At dawn, federal marshals raided the Ashworth Sterling's homes on live television. Under RICO, their assets were seized to repay victims across 4 states. Sterling Premium was dissolved faster than a burning match. The charges read like a prosecutor's wish list: attempted murder of a federal judge, first-degree arson, multi-state insurance fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and RICO violations, each enough to keep them locked away until archaeologists uncovered their bones. That night, sitting in Walt's kitchen surrounded by agents from several states, I still smelled the smoke clinging to my clothes. But now, it smelled like justice being cooked at high heat. Harold's sanctuary was gone, but the community's defense of me kept his memory alive. Bryn had tried to end my life in my sleep. Instead, she'd built the perfect federal case to ensure she'd never walk free again. 7 days later, she walked into my courtroom in shackles, designer athleisure replaced by an orange jumpsuit, facing a legal avalanche. The irony was so sharp I almost wondered if Harold had arranged it from beyond. The room overflowed. Marshals, FBI, insurance investigators, prosecutors from 4 states, and 17 families she'd tormented sat ready for battle. Cameras from Channel 7 were locked on the drama. Judge Patricia Morrison, taking over after my recusal, began the arraignment. The people of Colorado versus Bryn McKenzie, also known as Bethany Sterling, also known as Rebecca Ashworth. 30 seconds for the aliases alone. 4 minutes for the charges: attempted murder of a federal judge, first-degree arson, fraud, laundering, conspiracy, RICO, identity theft, witness protection fraud, civil rights violations. Her public defender asked for a reasonable bail. Federal prosecutor Amanda Stevens stood with the confidence of someone holding a royal flush. Your Honor, this defendant has used 6 identities across 4 states, stolen over $4 million, destroyed 15 communities, and tried to kill a sitting federal judge. The gallery's low rumble of anger made marshals shift uncomfortably. And then, Bryn made her fatal mistake speaking directly to the court. She accused me of abusing my position to lead a vendetta against law-abiding homeowners and weaponizing the federal government against legitimate HOA authority. Judge Morrison's reply landed like a gavel to the soul. Miss McKenzie, you are charged with attempting to murder a federal judge by burning down her home while she slept, embezzling hundreds of thousands from emergency funds, and terrorizing elderly and minority residents under false identities. The evidence against you: security footage, bribery recordings, harassment documentation, financial theft, and perjured insurance claims leaves no doubt. You are not the victim. You are a domestic terrorist. Then came the blow that broke her. Morrison declared her crimes had displaced over 200 families and would be prosecuted to the fullest extent possible. Bryn's face collapsed as reality hit. Bail denied. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Neighbors hugged. Mrs. Rodriguez cried. Walt pumped his fist. And when Bryn hissed at me on her way out, "This isn't over, Judge," I delivered the line that sealed her fate. "Thank you for confirming this was targeted harassment." That confession will be noted for sentencing. 2 years later, I sipped coffee in my rebuilt kitchen, watching cardinals feed at Harold's memorial. knowing Bryn was in a concrete cell for life. The jury had taken just 3 hours and 47 minutes to convict, long enough to break for lunch. She got life without parole for attempted murder, plus sentences for arson, fraud, and civil rights violations that would keep her locked away until Colorado became beachfront property. Her husband got 25 years. The $3.2 million in seized assets funded restitution for victims across 4 states, the largest HOA fraud payout in U.S. history. Pinewood transformed from Bryn's kingdom of fear into a model community studied in law schools. Walt was unanimously elected HOA president, implementing transparency rules and protections against discrimination. The reforms inspired statewide legislation, the Pinewood Protection Act, which spread to 15 other states. The Judge Harold Blackwood Memorial Scholarship had grown to $750,000, funding first-generation students studying community law. This year's recipient? Maria Rodriguez, once a victim's child, now heading to Harvard Law to defend vulnerable communities. Our Pinewood Justice Festival drew thousands. Walt's band played. Pat Donnelly taught workshops that had already helped residents in 47 states fight HOA corruption. The ripple effect was real. 41 criminals arrested using our model. Gavel, my cat, ruled the rebuilt sanctuary with smug authority. Harold's roses bloomed stronger than ever, and the sound of children's laughter replaced the sirens and shouting that had once haunted us. Justice wasn't just punishment, it was safety, healing, and the promise of a better future. So, if you're fighting your own HOA nightmare, remember, document everything, unite your neighbors, and never let bullies win through silence. Your fight might save others down the road. Drop your HOA war stories in the comments, and hit subscribe. Next week, we're dismantling a tax assessor's scheme to steal an entire neighborhood. That revenge. Biblical.